Hello, and welcome to Hopkinton Works, an original HCAM series where we look at those who make our community work. I'm your host for today, Jim Cousins. As your friendly community TV director, I work closely with many members of the Hopkinton community from departments and committees, businesses and nonprofit organizations to individual residents, and all of the above make Hopkinton a great place to live. There are many examples where exciting opportunities are realized and our potential is fulfilled. This program was created to share some of these stories with you. In this episode, I am very happy to chat with Elaine Lazarus, who is our new town manager. Elaine, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
All right, now there's so much to talk about just about what you're doing in Hopkinton, but this is your first time here. So I'd like to take us way back to when you were growing up, and what did you want to do, and what did you go to school for?
Okay, grew up in Massachusetts, and one of the things that always kind of interested me was the natural world, the environment, planning, and so. My father was on the Conservation Commission, and I was very interested in town government. Couldn't wait to go to my first town meeting when I turned 18. And as I had mentioned to others, my parents had all of the town reports for the community in their home, and I read all of those cover to cover. I just loved the idea of municipal government. So I went to college, University of Massachusetts, Amherst, and for the first year and a half, I was a civil engineering major. But I was really interested in planning, and so I did switch my major to landscape architecture and regional planning. It's the department, and it's the major of environmental design.
Okay.
When I graduated with that bachelor's degree, I then went to the University of Rhode Island for a master's degree in community planning.
Oh, okay. I just want to recognize how awesome it is that as a young kid you were reading town reports.
I loved them.
That's
My
great.
sisters can't believe it, but I did.
That is great. Okay, so you just graduated and you have a master's degree. It's in town planning. Where did you go from there?
So from there, I went to work for the General Services Administration in Boston. And so that is a federal agency that manages federal facilities. That's one of the things that they do. And they have community planners for the New England region. And so I originally took a job across the hall from the planners in the inventory management department, waiting for a planning job to open up. And so after a year, I was fortunate enough to be hired for in the planning office.
So this is in Boston, but you're working for the federal government.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
And so one of the things that I did there was in the New England region. I had some, based on my experience at URI and at UMass in the historic realm. One of the things that I did there was National Register nominations for federal buildings that they were going to be selling, such as the Customs House in Boston.
Okay.
So that was a very exciting thing that I did, was to go through the whole building and take an inventory of all of the architectural features and the history of the building, and then complete those applications for the federal designation.
Really? And so you were doing that when they were getting ready to sell those buildings?
Correct.
And just curious, what kind of restrictions did they put? Where did they sell them to, and what happened to them?
So for the Customs House, they put on a historic preservation restriction, and so it was listed on the National Register. And we also worked with the City of Boston on that. And it was sold to a private entity, and I think now it's I'm not sure what it is now. Originally it was a hotel or timeshare type of situation.
So it kind of fits in with planning, right? But it's also historical. Did you have to get some new knowledge in that realm?
I had interest in architecture and design, but I got a lot of books and I read about the subjects, and I learned along the way, and from other people at GSA and people that I knew.
Okay. All right. So there you are, working in Boston in there. And then what happens?
And then the federal government decided to lay off all of the planners and bring the office to New York.
Okay.
So we had several months' notice that was going to happen. So I always had wanted to work in municipal government. So it was my opportunity to move on and look to enter municipal government. So I went from there to the town of Wellesley, where I was a staff planner there.
Okay. And staff planner, what does staff planner mean?
So there was the planning director and myself,
Okay.
And so I worked with the local historic district commission, the design review board, and the planning board on community planning projects, on changes to the historic district, at those kinds of projects.
So is that the type of situation where you would respond to developers or other people coming in saying, we want to do something in Wellesley, and you reviewing that and seeing what could happen?
Yeah, there was a lot of change going on there in Wellesley Square and other parts of Wellesley, perhaps people demolishing buildings and building new buildings that were being reviewed by the planning board, by the design review board, sometimes the historic district changes. So there was a lot of work in that regard, but also master planning, and GIS work and other work like that.
Right, right. So what was like an example of something that you really enjoyed in your time at Wellesley, something that you liked working on?
I really enjoyed working with the design review board in reviewing new buildings that were trying to be placed in older neighborhoods, older commercial districts. And it was the constant discussion about whether it should match the historic or whether it should be modern and kind of reflect elements of that. And just, I loved the whole discussion of planning and architecture and how that all fit together.
Right, right. You know, just going into Boston the other day, my wife and I were looking at the skyline, and one of those buildings did not look like the others, if you know what I mean. It was just like very different. So what's it like having that tension between you're making something new, should it look like the old or should it look like something different? I mean, is that like a very emotional, contentious issue, or is it more just like cerebral and you talk about different things?
Yeah, what I loved was the the architect coming in with the applicant and the design professionals on the board having this kind of discussion, and I just loved the board committee dynamics and how it gets discussed. And I wouldn't say it was contentious, but each had their own opinions, and eventually they reached a consensus of what was best for the community. So I just loved the dynamics of the whole board committee discussion.
Now I am sure, because everybody is different and people have their own strengths and skills, that there may be different people who have the resources that want to do something in a place, right? Is it typically more that somebody with resources is interested in more of a community and going in with that, or are they looking more at the bottom line on what's the most efficient for what they want to do, or is it a mix?
I think it's a mix. I think an applicant is trying to balance those two. They want to have an attractive project that people like, but they also want to do that economically. So there's always that trade-off.
Okay. All right. So you're in Wellesley for a period of time, and did you have another position there, or did you move on to another location from there?
From there, I moved on. I wanted to be the planning director in a community, so I went from there to be a shared planner for the towns of Charlton and Dudley. And I was their first planner. Under a state grant they received to share a planner between the two of them, so 20 hours in each community for a full-time position.
Okay. And so we're talking about planner, and it's like planning new things, how it fits in with the community type of thing. And so you were that department, so you were the head of it because it was you.
Yeah.
Right. Now I know Dudley and Charlton, and they're very quiet rural communities. What types of things did you work on there?
So what I loved about that was being the first one there, I got to organize the office. I like to be organized and efficient, and so I organized all of the files, all of the plans, the offices, but also in Charlton in particular, zoning had only been adopted a couple of years previously.
Okay.
So they were one of the last communities in Massachusetts to adopt zoning.
Okay.
And so working with the planning board, it was all new for everyone.
Yeah.
So working with the planning board to craft zoning amendments, to further their vision, for the community, to work on the master planning, and just to really help the community develop its vision for the future and kind of codify that into zoning. So that was very exciting.
Yeah. So that's very interesting. So here's Charlton, one of the last communities, you said, to have like zones, have zoning, and you were working on amendments and things like that. So I have to ask you a question: is zoning ever done? Or is it always like, as the community changes over time, that it has to be? Because every year at town meeting, we're talking about some type of zoning.
It's never done. There's always tweaks. There's new, mandates that come down. There are community desires for different uses or to change something that's not working. So it's never done.
Okay. All right. And just very quickly. So Dudley and Charlton are very rural, right? So what types of projects were you mostly working on?
I think for there it was some new development subdivisions.
Okay.
Because there was land and people were starting to move west from Metro West out. So there were a lot of new subdivisions. So there was a lot of subdivision plan work there.
Okay.
And
All right.
inspecting subdivisions and things like that.
Okay. So there you were, Dudley and Charlton, for a period of time. And then where did you go to?
Well, after that, the state was experiencing financial difficulties, and so the grant dissolved. So I was then working solely for the town of Charlton because Dudley did not have the funding to continue that. So I then came to Hopkinton because I was looking for a full-time job planning. So I came to Hopkinton.
All right. So here we are. Wow, you've been like in some really interesting places all around. All right. So at this point, you had a bachelor's degree and a master's?
Correct.
Okay. And now you're in Hopkinton. And what department are you in there?
So I worked for the planning board. So there was the planning department, and it was myself and administrative assistant. So it was the two of us.
Okay. Now, did you say you worked for the planning board?
Yes.
Okay. So what do you do? Because the planning board is an all-volunteer board. So what do you do in the professional capacity in your interactions with the board?
So one of the things that I was hired conditional upon my completing a master plan in my first year.
Okay. Wow.
So my predecessor had been working on that, but it had not been completed. And it was something I had not really completed before either, but I needed the job, and so I said, yes, I could do that.
All right.
And I did do that, and it was a really great project. And it helped me to learn the community in that first year and to make connections with other departments and organizations and learn the demographics of the community. And so that was something exciting that I did in the first year that I was able to complete that.
So, I'd really love to hear a little bit about that because when I hear master plan, I wouldn't know what to do or where to start. Like, what is the master plan and what types of things did you do working on that?
So the master plan sets out the town's vision for its growth and development over a period of, say, 5 to 10 years.
Okay.
And so it's, first of all, where are we? What is our demographics? What is our situation? What is our economy like? And then working with citizen groups to figure out where the town wants to go. And then deciding what are the goals and strategies for getting there over the next 5 to 10 years.
Okay.
So it's, coming up with proposals, working with others in the community to define that, and then writing it all, and then having maps that also illustrate that as well. So it's a land use plan for growth and development for the community.
Okay. All right. So now there's no judgment here. There's no judgment in this question, but I've seen some pretty explosive growth in our community, right? So when you were first working on that master plan, like what was it like? What were you anticipating? And like how can you see into the future 5 to 10 years?
It's not easy, but I think Hopkinton, and I wasn't, I think, the only one that felt this way. It was so well situated for commuting purposes that it was going to be a place, it had been a place where people wanted to live, and it was going to continue to be very attractive to people to live here and to work here because of its location to Boston, Worcester, and other places north and south. So I think the growth of the community was anticipated. And the thought was, if we are going to grow, how are we going to manage that? Because you can't stop it, but you can manage it. And so things like open space planning, along with subdivision development. So the town, over the next several years, was very successful in gaining a lot of land as open space as it allowed certain development. So they went kind of hand in hand. So that kind of thing was planned because people knew that we knew that this was going to grow.
Right. So that's interesting. So you're really not planning the rate of growth. You're planning, if I might say, on managing the growth that's anticipated to come in.
Correct.
What's needed to be in place and how we respond and things like that. So I have seen over the past several years the state talking to Hopkinton about what they expect the rate of growth of students to be, and it never really seems to be enough. Like like I was talking to Dr. Kavanaugh at one point, and she was saying that, well, the state has actually modified how they look at it based upon the growth that our town has experienced. So from your first master plan, right, how did it go? Like, did you like kind of guess correctly with what was going to happen, or were you surprised as well as other entities?
Yeah, I think it went more or less as expected, but you can't predict everything.
Right.
And I think the growth in the 90s was far more than people anticipated. And then there was a dip when the economy, it comes and goes with the economy, but because there was so much vacant land here, so much available land that owners wanted to sell, and it had been something they had invested in perhaps, and this was something that they had looked forward to selling and selling for development, and people are entitled to do that.
Right.
So that did occur, but I think one really great thing that happened along with there was the focus on preserving open space as the town grew, so that it kept that, and so forming the local land trust was something that occurred in the 90s in response to the need for an organization separate from the town that could own and manage open space and preserve that for the future. So those are the kind of exciting things that happened that I think were recommended perhaps in the master plan.
Right. And I don't know if you remember when the state started matching funds that like town meeting would put aside for preservation and things like that. But I remember hearing in the early days that Hopkinton was an early adopter of that, and at the beginning got a really good match for their contributions.
That's correct. So Hopkinton was one of the few to adopt that. But before that, the town had wanted to do something similar, so it created the Open Space Preservation Commission by special act and a revenue stream for that. And when the CPA that you had referred to, when that came in, kind of moved away from that funding stream for open space, and it went through the CPA instead.
Oh, okay. All right. So this must have been really fun for you because you liked working with boards and committees.
Yes.
So just between you and I. So like you have years of experience, right? You've read a lot of books. You kind of know what you're doing. How is it working with non-professionals who are volunteering in their situation? Because it seems like you have to do a lot of educating and a lot of like talking about laws and regulations and stuff, or how does that go?
Well, I think even though people may not be professionals in the field of a land use related field, they still have, a wealth of experience and knowledge to bring to the table. You don't have to be a land use professional to do land use planning in a community setting like that and to chart the growth and the development of your community. So I think it's just, one of the things I enjoy about the board and committee process is just the dynamics of talking and brainstorming. Because professionals in the field don't know everything that the community wants or the ideas that people come from. People come from a number of places with bringing new ideas, and it's all very exciting to bring that together and just brainstorm and talk about that. Right. And I think a lot of ideas come from that process.
Yes, and I love that. And I'm just curious, though, there's like guidelines and there's laws about how things can be built and stuff. Does the planning board intersect with that at all, or are they mostly just big picture what we should like to have in our community?
Well, it does have to get kind of funneled through what's legal.
Okay.
So there's a lot of ideas that people might have, and they sound like great ideas, but in Massachusetts we can't do that. But sometimes the ideas are proposed to address, say, a symptom, and then when you look at it, maybe there's a problem that we can address at a deeper level to kind of get at that problem in another way.
Yeah.
So it's part of that process is looking at the problem, identifying the problem and what are the ways we can get at that. And it might not be what people thought of originally, but maybe there's a way legally we can do something about that.
Okay.
And so that's part of the process, and then synthesizing everything that people have said into, say, a written document.
Right. Okay. So there you are. You're there for the first year. You get your master plan done. So you have the big party.
No.
And then what goes on?
So then I worked, in the planning office for a number of years. Eventually, in 2010, the planning office, which had grown a bit, merged with other land use offices, Conservation Commission, Board of Appeals, and the Building Department, to name the core groups, into a land use department. And so I became the head of this new land use department in 2010.
Okay. Okay. Wow. That's a really interesting group of organizations that came together. Like, so building department, you said, right?
Right. Correct.
What did they do?
So building department is the building inspector and all the other electrical, plumbing inspectors who issue and review and inspect building permits for new structures or additions, pools, anything required under the state building code.
Oh, okay. So that sounds, all those organizations, it sounds very dynamic, very like, did you have a really big office? Where were you located?
So that was at that time when they finished off the third floor of Town Hall, which before had been an attic.
Yep.
And so the Town Hall was expanded into the third floor for the Land Use Department, and the Board of Health moved up there.
Oh, okay. All right. And tell us a little bit about your time there. Something that you really enjoyed working on, or how it went melding all these different organizations into one. It sounds like really interesting.
It was great. It was wonderful, and it was one of the things I enjoyed was learning more about the other professions involved in building and conservation and in zoning. I began attending Board of Appeals meetings and learning more about that process, and working with building inspectors on the things that they were working on. And so we all learned a lot about what each other did, and formed a really nice, cohesive department that was efficient and more functional than we had been separately in our separate silos. Although we worked together on a daily basis, it really formed a nice, cohesive group of people working on related projects, related applications, and planning issues.
Now, zoning board of appeals, that's when there's a problem, right? Somebody's appealing something, somebody wants to do something that hasn't been allowed.
Oh, they need a special permit or a relief from a setback requirement, something like that.
Okay, okay. So now I get it. Now I can see where you come in, because you work on all that stuff and you have a knowledge of what the ground is like.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. And how long were you there?
From 2010 to 2016.
Okay. All right. So what happened? Any big projects come around between that time?
More master plans.
Okay.
So, master plans typically have been done every 5 to 7 years, and so after that first one, I think I worked on 2 more after that, and also wrote open space and recreation plans for the town as well. So there's planning efforts, but also this was also a time of growth. So reviewing legacy farms. Planning, participating in the host community agreement process with the developer, and then seeing that project go forward after town meeting approved it, and making that work and making that happen was a big part of what I did there.
Yeah. So Legacy Farms was massive in our community, right? It was like really, really talked about a lot, and a lot of things going on. How happy are you with the final result, how it came out?
So I think it does match what town meeting saw as the vision for Legacy Farms. The type of housing, the community that it formed has become part of the community, the open space that's available for people. It's what the town had voted for.
Yeah, excellent. Okay. All right, so then 2016, what happened then?
So in the years leading up to 2016, I had become interested in and thought more about a holistic approach to town government. And so I had started thinking about where my career might go in that regard. I had already met my career goal, was to be planner in a community. So in looking forward, I was thinking of new goals. And so one of the things I was doing was volunteering in the community that I lived in to serve on various boards and committees to kind of learn more about municipal finance, economic development, I was on a wind energy committee. Just a variety of things that were of interest to me where I could learn.
Yeah.
And also there became available a Mass Municipal Association Suffolk University program for a certificate in local leadership and government.
Okay.
And so I did participate in that program, which was 5 or 6 college courses at the master's level at Suffolk University. And it was in a variety of topics: administrative law, municipal finance, that kind of thing. So I decided after finishing that project in 2012 to continue on at Suffolk to get the master's in public administration.
Okay.
So I did get that additional master's in 2015.
Congratulations. So you have 2 master's
Yes, I do.
degrees.
Yeah.
Okay.
So in 2015, I did that, and then I was able to move from there to the town manager's office, still as head of the land use department, in the position of director of land use and town operations.
Oh, okay. You know, I think that when you talk about it, it just sounds so natural. It sounds like you're one of those people who knew from a very young age what you would like to do, and you did it, and you accomplished it. And once you were there, you saw what the next level was. It kind of, to me, is like when a actor wants to direct a movie. You know, they kind of like know the skills, and this is a position that they can take to have even more impact and have more input into what's going on.
That's a good analogy.
Yeah, and it came 1 year after you finished your second master's.
Correct.
Okay, and so who was our town manager when you got that position?
That was Norman Camello.
Okay, so he brought you in for that.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
and then that grew into a assistant town manager position?
Right, so a couple of years later, the title changed, but it was essentially the same thing. So all along, I've still been head of the land use department while I've been assistant town manager.
What do you look at as a town manager that you're going to be interested in getting involved with or helping out with?
Center School and its future. That building, that front part of that building is so important to the community to preserve. And I'm hoping with my past, knowledge of historic preservation and that kind of thing, we can kind of work something with a public-private partnership.
Thank you so much for spending this time, and I really look forward to seeing what you do within Hopkinton.
Thank you for having me.
All right. And thank you for tuning in to Hopkinton Works. Please look for future episodes where we will bring you more stories of those who make our community succeed